time, I was thinking, big deal. He's gonna come up, fix the comms, and go back in. That's what I thought.
I did too. I thought, well, this isn't gonna stop things proceeding. It's just a glitch.
I see light.
You light coming?
He's on the surface. Dead surface.
Hey, let's see it. Whoa, what is it?
A Roman sword.
That is phenomenal.
For generations, Oak Island has been shrouded in mystery and legend. Some believe that Vikings arrived here long before Christopher Columbus. Others think it may have been a secret hiding place for the lost treasure of the Knights Templar. And of course, there's the popular theory that pirates buried a vast fortune of gold deep beneath the island. Now, however, new evidence could change everything. There are signs that the Romans might have reached Oak Island as well, and this isn't based on just a single Sluchini discovery. Several unusual artifacts have been found, all dating back to Roman times. But uncovering them wasn't easy. In fact, the search nearly cost someone his life. So what exactly happened? What did they discover, and how did they find it? Oak Island is filled with secrets. For over 200 years, people have been digging, drilling, and diving in search of whatever lies beneath the surface. But before the discovery that could potentially change everything, there was a dangerous attempt to solve one of the island's biggest mysteries, Borehole 10X. Borehole 10X isn't just an ordinary hole. It's a deep, water-filled shaft that has challenged treasure hunters for decades. It all began with Dan Blankenship, one of the island's most dedicated explorers. He believed this borehole might lead directly to whatever treasure or structure was hidden underground. And honestly, considering the strange items already found on Oak Island, gold chains, stone carvings, and centuries-old coins, it didn't seem impossible. But exploring Borehole 10X was anything but simple. The shaft descends about 235 feet, far from an easy excavation. It begins with a 181-foot vertical drop reinforced with steel and concrete. At the bottom, it narrows into an extremely tight tunnel, about 44 feet long and only 27 inches wide, barely enough space for a grown person to squeeze through. To make matters worse, the entire tunnel is submerged in murky water, leaving divers with absolutely no visibility. It's not a stable environment either. Over the years, equipment has been lost down there, and debris like rocks and dirt continues to collapse into the shaft. Every descent carries a real risk of getting trapped, or worse. Because of these dangers, only highly experienced divers are willing to attempt it. That's why the Lagina brothers brought in professionals Harvey Marash and Michael Gartz to explore Borehole 10X. They understood the risks, but even they weren't fully prepared for what would happen. The plan was straightforward. Michael would go first as the safety diver, while Harvey would venture deeper into the tunnel. The surface crew would monitor them through an underwater communication system. Everything seemed ready. But just minutes into the dive, things went wrong. Michael's communication system suddenly failed. There was no signal, no voice, nothing. He was about 100 feet underwater in complete darkness, with no way to communicate if something went wrong. The team on the surface had no idea whether he was safe. They called out to him, but there was no response. Panic began to set in. If Michael was trapped or running out of air, they had no way of knowing. For 32 long minutes, there was complete silence. It may not sound like much, but when someone is underwater and unreachable, every second feels endless. The crew tried tapping on the pipe to send signals, but still nothing. Tension grew on the surface. If something had gone wrong, rescuing him wouldn't be simple. Divers can't just rush to the surface from that depth. It's dangerous and requires careful decompression to avoid serious health risks. Then, finally, a light appeared beneath the water. Harvey was coming back up. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Once he was safely out, the obvious question followed. What happened down there? Despite the chaos, Harvey had managed to explore a significant portion of the shaft. But once he entered the narrow tunnel, conditions became even worse. Visibility dropped to zero. Thick clouds of silt filled the water, making it impossible to see anything at all. He had to rely entirely on touch, feeling along the walls to understand his surroundings. He could sense debris, possibly old wooden structures, broken rocks, and scattered objects, but nothing that clearly pointed to the legendary treasure chamber. Then came the biggest obstacle, a drill bar. This wasn't a small object he could simply move. It was a massive 20-foot-long metal bar that had fallen into the shaft decades earlier. It was stuck inside the narrow tunnel, blocking the path forward. Harvey tried to maneuver around it, but the space was too tight. His movement became restricted, and for a moment, he wasn't sure he'd be able to get out. The situation quickly became dangerous. He had to twist his body and push himself backward through the cramped space, scraping against the rough walls. His breathing grew heavier, and his air supply was limited. Every second mattered. Somehow, he managed to free himself and begin the ascent back to the surface. The experience made one thing very clear. Borehole 10X wasn't going to reveal its secrets easily. In the end, it may have been fortunate that nothing major was found there, because only then did the team shift their focus to other areas of the island, leading to discoveries that could prove even more significant. After the danger and chaos of Borehole 10X, the team realized it was time to change their approach. The shaft had proven to be risky, unpredictable, and, so far, unhelpful in providing answers. But Oak Island still held plenty of secrets, and they weren't about to give up after one setback. As they considered their next move, they shifted focus to another area that had shown promise but hadn't been fully explored. That's when they came across something unusual. At first, it looked like nothing more than a rusted piece of metal buried in the soil. But as they cleared away more dirt, it became clear this wasn't just random debris. It was a pulley. It was old, heavy, and carefully made, suggesting it hadn't simply washed ashore. Someone had placed it there intentionally. The discovery raised new questions. Pulleys are often part of complex systems, used to lift heavy loads or operate hidden mechanisms. Could this have been part of a centuries-old system designed to retrieve treasure? Maybe it was used by earlier searchers, or perhaps it belonged to whoever had been on the island long before modern explorers arrived. As interesting as the pulley was, it wasn't the most shocking find of the day. Just as the team was regrouping, Charles Barkhouse arrived with something that immediately captured everyone's attention, an artifact that could completely change their understanding of Oak Island. He revealed that a Roman sword had been discovered in Mahone Bay, just off the island's coast. The story behind it was just as intriguing. The sword had reportedly been found in the 1940s by a local family who were illegally scalloping in the area. Instead of reporting it, they kept it hidden, passing it down through generations. Now, after decades of secrecy, it had finally surfaced. The sword itself appeared to be made of bronze or brass, with a distinctive and detailed hilt. It was heavier than expected and featured an ornate design that didn't look modern. Most striking was a carving believed to represent Hercules, a figure commonly associated with Roman military symbolism. At first glance, it certainly looked ancient. But the discovery raised a major question. How could a Roman artifact end up in North America? According to mainstream history, the Roman Empire never reached this part of the world. Their influence extended across Europe, parts of the Middle East, and North Africa, but not across the Atlantic. So what was this sword doing near Oak Island? Theories quickly emerged. Some believed it was proof that Romans had somehow crossed the ocean long before Columbus, or even Norse explorers. Others were more cautious, pointing out that even if the sword was authentic, it didn't necessarily mean Romans had brought it there themselves. It could have arrived much later, perhaps carried by European collectors, or traded across long-distance routes that spread artifacts far beyond their origins. The team knew speculation wasn't enough. They needed solid evidence. To find answers, they brought the sword to St. Mary's University in Halifax, where experts in archaeology and metallurgy could study it. If the sword truly dated back to Roman times, it could completely reshape what we know about early transatlantic travel. The first expert to examine it, Dr. Miles McCallum, noted that the sword resembled ceremonial weapons often associated with gladiators or high-ranking Roman officials. That was an encouraging sign. The design, size, and balance all seemed consistent with something that could be nearly 2,000 years old. But appearances alone weren't enough to prove anything. The real test came through chemical analysis. Scientists examined the metal composition to see if it matched known Roman materials. If it did, that would strongly support its authenticity. If not, it might be a later reproduction. The results were complicated. Some elements did match Roman metallurgy. The sword contained copper, tin, lead, and even traces of arsenic, all consistent with ancient Roman bronze. That was promising. However, there was a problem. The way the sword had been made didn't fully align with known Roman techniques. Instead of being crafted using the traditional lost wax casting method, it appeared to have been made using a bivalve mold, a method not typically used by Roman blacksmiths for weapons like this. This detail raised doubts. It suggested the sword might not be from the Roman era after all. Some experts proposed it could be from a later period, possibly medieval or even early modern, created in a Roman style. It might have been a collector's item brought to Oak Island much later. Another possibility was even more intriguing. What if the sword had been placed there intentionally? Oak Island has long attracted treasure hunters and storytellers. Over the years, many people have tried to contribute to its legend. It's not impossible that someone planted the sword to deepen the mystery. So was it an elaborate hoax or a genuine ancient artifact that somehow made its way across the ocean long before history says it should have? The team wasn't ready to give up. They decided to seek a second opinion, turning to Dr. Krista Brosseau, a chemistry professor specializing in metal analysis. When she conducted a more detailed examination, she uncovered something unexpected. Further analysis of the sword revealed something unexpected. It contained a high level of zinc. This immediately raised concerns because zinc wasn't typically used in large amounts in ancient Roman bronze. Instead, it's more commonly found in modern brass. If that was the case, it suggested the sword might not be Roman at all, but rather a more recent creation. This was a major setback for the theory that Romans had once reached Oak Island. Still, not everyone was ready to dismiss the idea. Some experts pointed out that small amounts of zinc can naturally occur in ancient ores, meaning it could have ended up in Roman metal through contamination. Others argued that the presence of zinc alone wasn't enough to declare the sword fake. It simply meant further testing was needed. The debate grew even more intense when comparisons were made to similar swords found in Europe. Museums in Italy and Spain were found to have nearly identical examples, and those had already been identified as replicas from the 1800s. That didn't help the case for the Oak Island sword. If matching versions were known reproductions, it made it less likely that this one was authentic. But then, another perspective emerged. Some historians argued that just because replicas exist doesn't automatically mean this sword is one of them. It's possible the design was copied from an original ancient artifact, and perhaps the Oak Island sword could be that original, while the European versions were later copies. At this point, opinions were completely divided. Some experts were convinced the sword was nothing more than a 19th century reproduction. Others believed there was still a chance it could be genuine, pointing to its composition and the unusual circumstances of its discovery. And then, there were those who saw it as just another dead end in Oak Island's long history of mysteries, false leads, and unanswered questions. One thing was clear: the discovery sparked one of the biggest debates in the island's history. Whether real or fake, the so-called Roman sword captured everyone's attention. What makes it even more intriguing is that this isn't the only discovery in the area that hints at a possible Roman connection. For over 2 centuries, Oak Island has fascinated treasure hunters and historians alike. Every time someone feels close to solving its secrets, a new mystery seems to emerge. People have invested time, money, and even risked their lives trying to uncover what lies beneath the surface. While the legendary treasure remains undiscovered, many strange and puzzling objects have been found along the way. Some of the biggest mysteries involve items that simply don't seem to belong there. You might expect to find old tools, coins, or pirate artifacts. But Oak Island often presents discoveries that don't fit neatly into known history, including objects some believe could be Roman. If that were true, it would challenge everything we think we know about ancient exploration. According to mainstream history, the Romans never came close to North America. Yet, there are findings that make people question that assumption. For example, Roman-style crossbow bolts have reportedly been found on the island. These small, sharp projectiles closely resemble those used by the Roman military. The question is, how did they get there? Some believe they could have arrived much later through trade or during the age of European exploration. Others think they might suggest that Romans, or at least people carrying Roman weapons, reached this region long before Columbus or the Vikings. Another intriguing discovery is the lead cross found at Smith's Cove. This artifact, made of lead and bearing a design similar to medieval Templar symbols, was buried beneath layers of sediment. Some researchers connect it to the Knights Templar, a secretive group believed by some to have traveled across the Atlantic. Others suggest it could be even older, possibly dating back to Roman times. Analysis of the cross traced the lead back to southern France, a region once under Roman control. If accurate, it raises the possibility that someone from that part of the world reached Oak Island centuries earlier than expected. Then there's the mysterious 90-foot stone, discovered deep within the famous Money Pit. This large stone reportedly featured strange symbols that no one could immediately understand. Over time, some researchers have suggested the markings resemble ancient scripts, possibly Phoenician or Roman. Adding to the mystery, the stone disappeared in the early 1900s. However, records and sketches of its inscription still exist. If the symbols truly have ancient origins, it could suggest that someone familiar with those writing systems was on the island long ago. There are also the unusual stone roads and platforms uncovered beneath Smith's Cove. These aren't natural formations. They were clearly built by someone. But they don't match the construction methods used by colonial settlers. Some researchers believe these structures resemble ancient European engineering, possibly even similar to Roman roads or aqueduct systems. If that's true, it could point to visitors arriving long before Columbus. Or it could simply be the work of later explorers using unfamiliar techniques. Another controversial claim involves a Roman coin allegedly found near Oak Island. The issue is that its exact origin is unclear. Even if the coin is genuine, coins travel. They can be traded, lost, and passed down over generations. So finding a Roman coin in one place doesn't necessarily mean Romans were ever there. Still, it raises an interesting question. How did it end up near Oak Island in the first place? And then there's the mysterious shipwreck reportedly detected near Mahone Bay. The shipwreck itself hasn't been fully explored yet, but sonar scans suggest it's possibly dating back to the 1400s or even earlier, which would place it before Columbus's time. Some researchers believe it could belong to medieval sailors, while others think it might be even older, potentially connected to ancient seafarers. If any evidence ever links this wreck to the Romans, it would completely change our understanding of history. For now, though, it remains one of Oak Island's many unsolved mysteries. And we can't talk about Oak Island without mentioning the strange wooden platforms and underground tunnels discovered over the years. Excavations have uncovered multiple layers of wooden beams, arranged in a way that clearly suggests intentional construction rather than natural formation. Even more intriguing, some of these tunnels appear to be designed as traps, flooding with water whenever someone tries to dig deeper. This kind of setup is surprisingly similar to engineering techniques used in ancient times, including those of the Romans, who were known for their advanced underground systems, water control methods, and hidden chambers. It raises an interesting possibility. Whoever built these structures may have had knowledge of such techniques. Of course, skeptics argue that these features could have been created by later European explorers or early settlers. But there's a problem with that explanation. Many of these structures and artifacts seem to predate recorded colonial history. No one can clearly explain how they ended up there. And that's exactly why Oak Island continues to attract attention year after year. Even though most historians are cautious about linking these discoveries to the Romans, the sheer number of unusual findings suggests that someone may have been here long before the accepted timeline. With each new discovery, it becomes harder to completely rule out the idea that ancient visitors, whether Roman, Phoenician, or from some other unknown civilization, left their mark on the island. The deeper people dig, the more complicated the mystery becomes. Every artifact raises new questions. Just when one theory starts to make sense, another discovery challenges it. The idea that Romans might have reached North America is still debated, but one thing is certain: something unusual happened on Oak Island a very long time ago. Whether it was explorers, treasure hunters, or an unknown civilization, the past has left clues behind, and we're still trying to piece the story together. So what do you think? Could the Romans really have made it to North America? Or is there another explanation for these discoveries? And if you enjoy exploring mysteries like this, don't forget to subscribe to the Timefold channel and leave a like.